The inspiration behind Orlando Collected was that Orlando is celebrating its 150th anniversary in 2025 from its incorporation in 1875. And so Orlando Collected is our contribution to that celebration of Orlando's 150th anniversary. So this exhibition actually features 150 items curated from our collection as sort of a nod to that important 150-year milestone. The name Orlando Collected came about because we really wanted to send the message with the exhibition's title that this really is a collection of objects. It is not a narrative of Orlando's history. We also wanted to highlight the fact that what this exhibition is about at its core is the act of collecting, the important act of keeping things from the past in order to preserve history for future generations. So to curate the exhibition, we actually wanted to accomplish a few goals in doing that. One was to highlight our role as an organization that works to preserve Central Florida's history. And another major goal for us was to highlight and celebrate our community's role in preserving their own history. So for Orlando Collected, the theme of the exhibition is this idea that collecting is a thing that each individual in a community does. And so in order to highlight that, we've actually invited the community to help us curate this exhibition. We reached out to different cultural organizations, community organizations, public figures, individuals throughout the community to actually select items from our collection, or in some cases to loan us items for display. First artifact that you'll encounter is the minutes book from 1875 that is on loan to us from the city of Orlando. And that's the actual book where they recorded the minutes when the city of Orlando was incorporated. And then from there, we have the largest wall in the exhibit is an overview of Orlando's history. It's really kind of a highlights of Orlando's history. And that's really the only area in the exhibition where you will have a narrative of Orlando's history. So the exhibit really is not the history of Orlando, it's items collected from Orlando's history. One of the more interesting and surprising items to me was in our collection we have a stained glass window from Congregation of Shalom's 1925 building, which was on Church Street here downtown. When that congregation moved to a larger location in the 1970s, the building was actually sold to a different church, and so the windows were taken out. In the meantime, some of the windows that had existed, one of them was donated to the Historical Society's collection, but they didn't actually know where it came from. So as we were going through oral history interviews for this exhibition, we actually came across one from a gentleman named Joseph Wittenstein, who was born back in the early 20th century. He lived in Orlando, and he was actually able to identify where that window came from. The historian at the time was talking to him about us having this in the collection, and he knew exactly where it came from, so he was actually able to lend it provenance. So that was a really interesting for us in curating this exhibition. Some of the items in the exhibit that that the community has really been highlighting as connecting with them. One is the Ivy's Rexall drugstore sign that was on Orange Avenue south of downtown. A lot of people who've been in Orlando a long time remember that store, and they remember seeing that sign. Another item that people have pointed out as being particularly interesting to them is the receipts from the Sunglow Hotel. So the Sunglow Hotel was a hotel that African Americans could stay at during Jim Crow segregation. And so these receipts actually show major acts that came through Orlando, like B.B. King and the Harlem Globetrotters, among many others. We also have some interesting helmets on loan to us related to Orlando Fire Department. So one of them is the fire chief's helmet from 1886, which is actually all metal. So that's a really cool item that relates back to Orlando's earliest history. And then another interesting one is we have the helmet of Assistant Chief Calvin Brookhart, who is actually the only Orlando firefighter to die in the line of duty. One of the items in the collection that is my personal favorite is actually a collection of 4 Orlando Sentinel covers that are on loan to us from the Sentinel. These are the 4 covers that they ran throughout the night on election night of 2000. So it has particular interest for me because that was the first election that I was able to vote in. It was kind of the first election that I remember being conscious of civic duty and that sort of thing. And then in addition, it's just an interesting story in how newspapers operate, because as the uncertainty of who was going to actually take that election evolved throughout the night, they actually had to keep changing the cover because the news kept changing. What we thought the end result was kept changing. And so once they'd get through a print run, they had to stop, reset the presses, and run a new cover. And then again and again, and they actually ended up having 4 covers before they landed on the final one that night. So we have those 4 different covers featured in the exhibition. One thing that I think would actually be great if people took away from this exhibit, maybe they're not as familiar with Orlando's history. A lot of people that visit Orlando sort of think of us as just Disney, and I would love it if visitors who are maybe not as familiar with our history actually came here and saw the deep, rich history that Orlando actually does have to offer.